Hey guys, real quick, only 40% of our viewers are actually subscribed, so let's change that right now. Hit that subscribe button right below. The New York Giants have fired Brian Daboll, head coach, 2-8 this season, his fourth year as head coach. Joe Schoen, the general manager, as Sal, so beautifully articulated. Joe Schoen will remain the general manager. What's most interesting about this to me is that they came in together, Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll. So the reason why Giants fans and or media might be upset, it's like these two were tied at the hip, which I generally like as an organizational strategy. You bring the GM and the head coach in together. They work together. They have to be best buds in building this thing. Don't have to be. They just have to have the best working relationship, right? And so when it doesn't go well, how do you split the blame? And the Giants have decided to split the blame and say, Daboll's out, Joe Schoen is in, and Joe Schoen will also be leading the next head coaching search.
They decided to split the blame by being 100% on Daboll and 0% on Schoen. If you were an owner, would you then, so if you bring it, would you always couple GM to head coach and have them as a package deal come what may?
They don't all have to be coming in at the same year. I think the problem will arise when it's like how badly staggered it is. I mean, it's a different situation in, say...
Because it used to kind of be, it's become more of a package deal now, but it used to be the case where, you had a GM and he was like your head football dude, and that guy would hire a succession of coaches, come what may. Like the head coach would be the guy who took the blame for when things didn't work, and then the GM would just go out there and get the next guy, and that was the gig, right? But you had total confidence in the GM as the sort of the director of football, if you like, of the franchise. Now it's kind of like these kind of guys split responsibilities. They're often tied at the hip anyway, and it's become, I think, more difficult to figure out who's to blame for all this, and it ends up being just an office politics gig where it's like the GM has an easier task of basically convincing the owner. Owner comes in eventually pissed off, and it's like, look, something's got to change. And the GM basically just has an easier job of convincing the owner, well, the thing that's got to change is the head coach. It's not me.
So, it's an interesting discussion as you talk through that, Sam, thinking about my issue is when you have a GM who's like, say, 2 years ahead of the head coach or vice versa, especially a head coach, when they just have different goals. We brought this up at the beginning of the season. I'm not saying we predicted this, but I'm sure you could go back and we at least painted the picture of the Giants are 2-8. I may have used that exact record, right? You looked at their schedule, said there's a point where the Giants are 2-8, and the way I would have said it was, okay, Jackson Dart hasn't started yet, and then Daboll saying, I got to save my job, let's get Jackson Dart in there. Now that happened weeks earlier.
Yeah.
But that's part of the problem is when either guy is on the hot seat or it's iffy about whether or not they're going to be around, and they start to make decisions for the organization that aren't good. So did that happen, right? Did Daboll do that and run Dart and blah, 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 whatever it might be? But how do you separate that from Schoen? My only issue is when you have different goals from the front office and the head coach. That is more clear when they're in at different times. But if they come in together, maybe it's just as prevalent. Because if they come in together, you might have the same politicking, as you said, right? You still have to go to the owner and be like, look, I know we haven't won a whole lot of games over the last 4 years, but it's definitely the coach's fault, not mine. Right?
Yeah. I think it's inevitable just because they have different jobs that they have slightly different, goals in play. Like the coach's goal is always to win next week. The owner or the general manager's goal might be a more longer-term view of the whole thing. So part of the relationship always has to be getting those two people on the same page or at least to some kind of compromise where they're pulling in the same vague direction, if not exactly the same target. I think that's just inevitable with the two positions being different. The thing that's interesting to me here, number one, by the way, I'm upset that I posted a funny video of, like, remember when Brian Daboll got hired and there was that ridiculous video where he rolls in his truck and waddles towards the building in his suit and his little briefcase, and like the whole thing was pretty ridiculous.
Someone put it to like Matlock music or whatever it was at the time.
Yeah, it was crazy at the time. It went pretty viral. So I was like, well, it would be quite funny if you took that video and just reversed it Brian Daboll walking out of the building backwards into his truck and driving off. And I spent a concerning amount of time on my phone video editing that, because it's apparently not that easy on a phone, and tweeted it out. And I'm like, I know that this will not do anything. It's just not going to do numbers because I put effort into it. And it's nobody.
I
nobody
thought it was
watched
funny.
it.
You should retweet.
It was funny.
Retweet
and nobody,
yourself.
No, I can't do that.
Yeah, you can retweet
You just got to accept. It's one
like
of those
a little
things.
nudge. It's a reminder. I did this funny thing a couple days ago. Maybe it didn't get your feed the right way. Maybe it's for you didn't pick it up.
It's one of those things where it's funny and people they don't respect the joke, right? That's fine.
Did you A/B tested on Blue Sky? Did it catch up somewhere else?
I didn't do that. I should do that.
Anyway, it won't work.
So I'm upset by that. But the interesting thing to me is, why do it now? Why do it mid-season? Like, okay.
I think the concussions are the biggest driver. I think the Jackson Dart injuries are the biggest driver.
And that's the thing. So this is where it gets interesting, because we already had this discussion when he was still in the job, which is you now have this difficult tension between, like, apparently we were confused, or at least I was, when Jackson Dart started getting, like, his first start, and they deployed him like Tim Tebow. It's like you're going to run the ball. It's going to be like power football up the middle, and then occasionally you'll attempt to pass. And you're like, what? What did you see in his college tape that made you think that this guy was a Tim Tebow-esque rushing threat in the NFL? It seemed crazy to me. And then the more you've seen him play, it's like he's actually, he might be onto something. He is a way more dynamic and difficult to stop rushing threat than I gave him credit for as a prospect, as a draft prospect. But running him like that has now led to being evaluated for concussion 4 separate times already. That's a problem. But how do you square that with the idea that, well, apparently everyone overlooked this fact that he's Tim Tebow who can pass, right? So you've got this difficult dynamic now. If we've stumbled onto a really dynamic rushing threat at quarterback, but apparently running him like that is getting him concussed every 6 minutes. So what do? You just abandon the fact that he's able to do that and say, well, you can't do that anymore because it's getting you hurt? I think that's a difficult position to be in. And every coach of a quarterback that has that potential, right, the rushing element to his game, has to figure that out. And I think to a degree it's easier with quarterbacks like Lamar Jackson, who are elusive rather than power runners, where you can just say, look, do what you do, but the second there's any contact imminent, hit the turf. I think that's an easier thing than having a guy whose primary selling point is actually some power to his running game. And that's where the Giants were. Now, it seems crazy to me that Daboll was so desperate to save his job that he was like throwing his quarterback out there in this role that was definitely getting him hurt at a point like where no one else is on board, right? Like everyone else out here going, for the love of God, protect him. And you're like, no, send him into the breach. That I would be amazed if that was what was happening.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be that specific.
Like Daboll's out there, Ivan Drago style, going, if he dies, he dies, but he's winning the game.
No, I think it doesn't have to be like that. I think it's more likely, hey, what does this guy do well? We're trying to win the game on Sunday. And look, there was a point you could easily paint this picture with the Giants if they don't have these second half collapses against the Broncos. That's
the thing. See, this is what I think prompted this. Is eventually like that stat we read out Monday, that they had a 95% chance of winning three of these games and lost all of them, and the chances of that happening are like 1 in 60,000. Those are the types of numbers that make an owner go, something has to change. And I don't care what it is, figure it out amongst yourselves, but someone's head's got to roll. That's what happens. That's where, whoever that guy rocked up was like, this is the thing. Or with this Rizzo, the one game, right? This game, something's got to change at the end of this. I don't care that I'm reading out a list of things that actually are in the favor of the people I'm talking about firing. This game individually was so bad, people have got to get fired.
And I've seen that argument made by people. I don't know where most Giants fans land on Shane, Daboll, what they want, whatever. I've seen that argument made. Joe Schoen's built the team to have a fourth quarter lead. He's built the team to have, they're 2-8. What if they were 5-4? Well, 5-5. 5-5 after a slow start. They have 10 games.
What's the point you're making? What if they were better?
No, I'm saying if they didn't have the collapse.
Oh, if they hadn't lost 3 games that they should have won.
If they didn't have the collapses and they're sitting here at 5-5 instead of 2-8, you could say, all right, this team's coming up, and the roster's better, and the quarterback's elevating them, and things are moving in the right direction. And you certainly wouldn't blame the GM for that. You would say you did the hockey stick, right? You went down so you can come back up again, right? Like the business terms, right? We got rid of a bunch of veterans. Now we've got this core nucleus that we're building around. But I think it's both sides, right? It's the coaching issue, fourth quarter, blowing those leads, but also probably a roster issue as well.
But I think that's what prompted the move now. I don't really understand why you would fire a guy midseason unless the locker room's gone, the whole thing is a disaster. You have to do something. I don't think that's the case with the Giants at all. So I don't really understand why you would do it now, other than, Mara effectively looked at that same number on Monday that everyone else did and was like, I can't have that. Like, something's got to change. And, the thing that's got to change is apparently the coach as opposed to the general manager. So I think that part is strange, why you fire him now. I don't really see any purpose to that. The keeping Schoen part is interesting because basically throughout his entire tenure, you've been able to say, you can construct an argument for Schoen, you can construct an argument against him. Like, it's been pretty easy in either direction for the whole way. And even now you can say, look, there's some good things, right? Like Abdul Carter looks like a superstar. That defensive line, it's got some insane talent. There's a lot of things that he's – and, in all of this, remember, they are currently operating without a running back that looked pretty good as a rookie, without their wide receiver one. They're missing some very important players to this team, which is part of why they're not winning these games. On the other hand, there still seems to be quite a lot of lacking talent on this team in just several areas. Plus, the way, even however fake or otherwise this was, the Hard Knocks thing effectively threw all the credit to Jackson Dart in the direction of Brian Daboll. So that would be a big thing if you're trying to be like, if you're in the pro Joe Schoen camp, you would be like, well, he's, Abdul Carter looks like a home run. Look at the way he maneuvered the draft for Jackson Dart, and he looks like a star. This is all good GM stuff. You're like, yeah. However, you specifically publicly threw all the credit for Jackson Dart in the direction of Brian Daboll, who you just marched out of the building. It's like, it's difficult to then take credit for that and be like, this is why he should still be here.
I want to answer both sides of that with Schoen, because I do feel like there's plenty of, he did this well, yeah, but.
Yeah.
Or he didn't do this particularly well, yeah, but. Like, there's both sides of it with Schoen. Did he publicly give Daboll all the credit for Jackson Dart, the way you just said, or are you talking about the videos that were posted?
It was in the Hard Knocks thing. I mean, He didn't come out after. I don't think.
I've seen the Hard Knocks videos, and my warning to you and everyone is that that's reality television.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Right? Reality television.
But my point is,
tells stories.
Yes.
Whether they're the right stories or not. Reality television takes people's reactions and just superimpose them into places where they weren't real. Just saying, that's reality TV. The way it was positioned was Joe Schoen kind of playing a little devil's advocate, like, if you really want him, we'll do. It's a bold move. And I don't think that's like, man, I can't believe you're twisting my arm here to go get this guy Dart. But that's the way the captions are going, right?
Yeah.
People put the caption out to the video, and the caption says Joe Schoen was pissed that he had to go get Brian Daboll's guy. Look at Joe Schoen, not a believer in Jackson Dart. Only Daboll was the one standing on the table for him. When all they're seeing is like a 15-second clip of the final piece of the decision, which took hours and hours and hours of discussion. And Joe Schoen could have been like, oh, yeah, absolutely. I would take Cam Ward 1 and Jackson Dart 2. Now, that was the one thing that they did show again. He made one last call to the Titans about Cam Ward. He made one last call because they had an offer on the table for Cam Ward and the Titans. So I think you could jump to the conclusion and
having tried to go up the year before as well.
And he tried to get Drake May the year before,
yeah.
Right? So you could jump to the conclusion and say they liked Cam Ward far better than everyone else in this draft.
Right. Which
you could
now,
also,
which everyone did, but now isn't looking great.
Yeah, fine. I mean, Brian Daboll may have liked Cam Ward.
Yeah.
More than Jackson Dart.
Everybody did. Right.
Right. If Joe, listen, let me just finish really quick. If Joe Schoen was making a power move to go get Cam Ward at 1, it wasn't against Daboll's wishes. It wasn't like Daboll's like, no, Dart's the guy. And Joe Schoen's like, no, I'm going to get Cam because it's all me. Like, they probably came to that conclusion together. So it's not like Schoen drafted Jackson Dart against his own will, and it was all Brian Daboll. So, but my warning to people is that's how it gets positioned based off of one video clip and everybody's, interpretation through captions that go viral.
Yeah. The point, though, is that in this set of circumstances, it doesn't matter whether it was real or not. The point is the public interpretation, the public view of that dynamic is that Daboll was the guy driving that decision. Whether or not that's true is irrelevant. The point is you have already at least endorsed by the fact that you did the show, whether or not it's accurate or not, you've at least endorsed this public view that Brian Daboll was the reason that Jackson Dart is in New York. So you then can't publicly try and take credit for that because the credit has already gone somewhere else. So that's the issue with that, is that the Giants can't use that as a reason to keep Joe Schoen, right? If you were there trying to justify why is this guy, like to Sal, if you were trying to fight back PR-wise to Sal, why is he still in the job? Well, Sal, look, Jackson Dart's here. He's a really good quarterback. We're trying to protect him from the coach who's trying to get him killed. The nucleus is here. Joe Schoen's done a great job. You can't do that and use Jackson Dart as a reason for Sal, because Sal will come back and say, Jackson Dart was Daboll's guy. You've shown it yourself by putting out this show that shows Daboll was the guy driving the decision. So whether or not behind the scenes it was collaborative and they were all on the same page and even Schoen was driving it and they just stitched it together, the one like beat of question he had, doesn't really matter. The point is the public view of that decision now, all the credit goes to Brian Daboll. So you can't use that as a reason that Schoen hasn't gone with him.
Yeah, I get it. And then my very logical self, Sam, would say it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because, I'm always back on this. There's no great QB evaluators. So it doesn't matter that he was Daboll's guy and that Daboll had the keen eye for Jackson Dart. It doesn't matter. It actually doesn't mean that he's the best coach for him, right? Because those are two different things. If you identify Jackson Dart and you hit on the player, that doesn't mean that Daboll's the best coach to then bring him through the next few years. It also doesn't necessarily matter that Joe Schoen wasn't the guy that was pounding the table for Jackson Dart. It matters a little bit that they got him because that is his job. They traded not a whole lot to come up into the first round and get him. And again, I said it on Monday, but I like the way Todd McShay laid this out even before the draft. Right, there were rumblings that this is Daboll's guy. They really want Jackson Dart, and McShay was saying, "Okay, that doesn't mean you take him at 3.
Right,
your job is to then maneuver the draft,"
which they did.
And so I think there's two things true here. I don't think you deserve a ton of credit for drafting Abdul Carter in a vacuum. He was the clear top player on the board. You drafted the expectation at 3. But you probably deserve some credit for getting Abdul Carter and then getting Jackson Dart, assuming both, continue on the same trajectory. That is a good job by Joe Schoen, right? So that's what I'm saying. Like every time I say, well, is the team worse than when they took it over? You could make that argument, but are they like on the way up in a better way with Malik Neighbors and with Abdul Carter, with Jackson Dart? Yeah, you would say that. It's actually I would say an attractive job because of some of the building blocks. The argument against Schoen would be if you were just drafting off a consensus board, you would take Malik Neighbors at 6, right, after your failed Drake May trade-up attempt. You would take Abdul Carter at 3 after your failed Cam Ward trade-up attempt. Right, you did the status quo essentially.
Right,
but because you were picking in the top 10, you got some really good players there, and that's the expectation when you're drafting.
I mean, I think the problem is that it's too easy to construct the argument in either direction for him everywhere. Like that draft in 2024 looks spectacular. Malik Neighbors looks like a superstar. Tyler Nubin, Andrew Phillips, Theo Johnson, Tyron Tracy. Those guys are all making impacts for a team. That's an amazing draft. This year's draft looks spectacular. Abdul Carter, Jackson Dart, Darius Alexander, Scattaboo, Marcus Bowe. Again, all sort of useful contributing players. And even if you say, okay, he was hired in like January 2022, so the 2022 draft is somebody else's board effectively, I think that's a reasonable way of doing it for a lot of these situations. I mean, January, whatever. Let's say, for the sake of argument, we dismiss 2022, so he doesn't get the blame for.
Those are two consensus picks.
Sure,
as well.
But let's say, let's just say you don't get any blame for Evan Neal. Let's just take away that draft for the sake of argument. 2023, not good at all. Deonte Banks looks like a bust, effectively. John Michael Schmitz hasn't worked out as an interior offensive line pick. Jalen Hyatt, disaster right now, albeit third-round disaster, like limited, you know what I mean? Point is, that's a complete wash as a draft. So it's like, even you want to say, 2024 rather, is really, really good. The year before that was a train wreck. So you can't, like, everything he's done for his entire tenure, it's like there's a good thing, there's a bad thing.
Mid.
Yeah, and if you can say that about a guy everywhere, it's probably fair to say he's not doing a great job.
So that's where we are. I was asked by New York media about a lot of this, and of course had some long-winded answers. And one of the questions was, I'll just give you this. One of the questions was, should he be the guy to find the next head coach? And the argument against is, well, he was, him and Daboll worked together with the Bills. So it's just like picking the next. For me, it's just like picking the next quarterback, right? The analyst in me is like, it's only if you missed on one doesn't mean you'll miss on the next one.
Well, that's in fact, with Joe Schoen, that's exactly the reason you give him this one, right? You made a mess of the last one, but your entire career is doing one thing wrong and one thing right. So by definition, this one's going to be right.
It's going to be right.
The other thing is, remember in the sort of pre-draft videos and stuff, they had this video of Joe Schoen asking his son who he wanted. And Joe Schoen's son wanted Jaden Daniels and Drake May. If you can't get, fine. He was like, his own son, I forget what age he is, but like not old. Like if he's in the teens, it's early teens. And he was basically like, look, sack up and go get Jaden Daniels. Like you're only going to have this job once. Like grow some balls and go get it done, right? It was effectively his son's advice to his dad. And it turned out he may have been dead on. And then he was like, look, I guess if you can't get Jaden Daniels, then Drake May. And so his son appears to have been the single smartest quarterback analyst in that entire draft. That's, I think, the order that I would have them in at the moment. And his son predicted that. I'm deathly curious who his son wants as the new head coach. Have we considered the fact that Joe Schoen's son might simply be the greatest football mind out there? I need to know what's his short list.
Yeah, we'll have to find out. Again, what if Joe Schoen's quarterback rankings were perfect that year? He just couldn't get the deal done.
Yeah.
This is why I bring up a million times. I don't care about people's quarterback rankings.
Well,
I don't care if you hit on this one quarterback. Joe Schoen could have had the quarterbacks ranked. And by the way,
and the Drake May
Caleb Williams is on the come up. But he may have thought Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, and Drake May are all potential top 10 quarterbacks. Guys, I would trade up to get them. Those are my QBs. They're in a whole different tier than Bo Nix, Michael Penix, and J.J. McCarthy, and it's clear as day, and this is our board. And maybe they even had Jaden 1 or Drake May 1, and they're going to look like super geniuses because they were bold, and they had one of those guys over Caleb Williams, which was the consensus. Maybe that was the case. But we'll never really know, and we only, his son knew, but Joe Schoen may have too. He may have been like, he had the same board as his son, but he just couldn't do the deal because New England didn't want to move. And certainly Washington wouldn't want to move in the division and give up Jaden Daniels. So if no one wants to move, it doesn't matter about your quarterback rankings.
I mean, that's the big thing is they seem to have tried extremely hard to get Drake May and couldn't get a deal done. Like, imagine what the story looks like if instead the Giants had drafted Drake May when that draft rolled around and let's just say he had the same development arc here, and who the hell knows. But if that had been the case, we would probably be, number one, Brian Daboll is not fired. But we're probably talking about a completely different dynamic and viewpoint of the entire New York Giants franchise based off something the GM was trying to get done. And simply the other team, it takes two to make a deal, and the other side was like, nah.
Yeah, and you could say, well, that's his fault for failing, but it's like, all right, I don't know what.
There's only so much you can do.
Yeah, I don't know what New England's going to do. Like, New England doesn't want just a receiver.
Right,
they
it's like
a
rocking up to somebody and I want to buy your car. And they're like, no. They're like, well, if you need, I'm blaming the guy for just not going high enough, right? But at some point, it stops making any sense. I want to buy your car. It's not for sale. Well, what if I gave you $50,000? It's not for sale. $100,000. Like, at some point, that becomes an idiotic deal.
It's still not for sale. I think they showed him walking into the Patriots box at the scouting combine.
Yeah.
Being like, hey, let's talk. He's trying to get up to 3. And then they got Malik Neighbors instead, and you get the quarterback a year later. So it may have, if Dart's as good as he's shown in flashes here, maybe it works out fine for the Giants and Joe Schoen.
Thanks for watching all the way to the end of the video.
Check the Mic is live Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday, so be sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss a video.
You heard the man. Subscribe.